Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are excited to have you here today to talk about agentic identity, what that means, what goes into it, and some of the varying descriptors and elements that are being discussed and sometimes disagreed upon in the industry right now. Um, I am joined by Neha and Greg, our Chief Product Officer and Chief Technology Officer here at P0 Security. P0 Security is the central authorization control plane for all identities accessing workforce data and sensitive systems. And I will hand it over to both of you so you can introduce yourselves quickly as well. Neha?
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. Yep, my name is Neha. I head product here at P0 Security. And yeah, I mean, over the last year and a half, everyone's talking about agentic security and what it means to secure applications. I'm super excited here to, have this conversation and talk about what it really means to control access for agentic applications.
And I'm Greg, and I'm likewise excited about bringing this topic to more and more people because it's something that we've been putting a lot of thought into here, like how to design the system in a way that's lets security professionals sleep sound at night. So hopefully we will get some good conversations and good questions out of this.
Great. Thank you both. Yes, and that's a great reminder. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. We will do our best to get to them live as they come through. And if there's not time permitting, we always follow up via email as well. So with that, I will kick it over to you again, Neha.
Yep, thank you. I mean, I think this comes as no surprise to anybody. Agents are literally everywhere. Even over the last 6 months, the conversations I've been having with organizations of any size, you see truly a proliferation of agents. And again, AI does help sort of improve productivity across organizations. So we're seeing usage, folks building different types of agents across the world, whether these are SOC agents, whether these are agents to help with some business problems, helping your finance HR teams. We're seeing integrations and agents across the board within different data systems that can help the different parts of the organizations to do their job better. But one underlying theme that we are seeing across the ecosystem is in the spirit of moving really fast, uh, thinking about how these agents access your systems is almost either an afterthought or, folks are not thinking about it in the right way and sort of giving over permissions or massive privileges to these agents in order to just move along and get these agents out into production and start sort of helping the organization. So we're seeing that same access problem manifest across the ecosystem regardless of what agents we are seeing being developed. And if you've seen the recent news, again, privilege abuse risk has been in the news for a while now, whether this was, 6 to 12 months ago, or whether some of these incidents that have happened recently, we've seen cases where agents were over permissioned. They had access to either credentials or permissions, standing permissions, and with those permissions, while these were not malicious agents trying to fix a problem within the ecosystem, did whatever was in their power to fix that problem, whether that is dropping an entire database, dropping backups, dropping customer ecosystems, or exposing inadvertently exposing organization data. We've seen that across the board, and here are just some of the examples that have happened in the recent past where agents have unfortunately abused the risk that or privilege that they had and basically caused organizational harm. And this is very sort of symptomatic or of just the standing privileges that we see across the ecosystem. We saw that previously with human identities, non-human identities, now sort of extending out into agents themselves and agents sort of exploiting this. But before we go deeper into like, how do we sort of secure this? It's important to understand, again, we were talking about seeing agents across the ecosystem and different types of agents. I think it's important to understand what are, categorize some of these agents that we are seeing, how some of these are triggered, and then, before we start thinking about what controls we want to bring into place to secure these different types of agents. So let's talk, dig deeper into the types of agents that we are seeing in organizational environments today.
So we put up this nice chart here to try to illustrate one key aspect of agents, which is, how much autonomy these agents have. You can see two axes here. One of them is the work model and the other one is the trigger type. And we believe that these two axes really define how much autonomy the agents have. And also agents kind of line up on a nice 45-degree line here. So if we look at work model, the way we used to work, let's say a year or 2 years ago, was very task-based, when you just prompted the agent to do a very specific thing, and you also explained how to do it. Like you had the solution in your mind, you described like this is how to do it, and you just had the agent do it. On the other end of this spectrum is a goal-based approach where you just have an outcome in your mind, but you don't have the specific steps. So you don't have the recipe for success, and you just describe the outcome to the agent. The agent will come up with a series of tasks that it thinks needs to accomplish, and will also, verify its work along the way. And as you can imagine, if you do work goal-based work, you will often find yourself like, oh, how was this actually done? After the thing is accomplished, and someone asks you, oh, I don't know what exactly happened, right? And the agent's autonomy increases as you move towards goal-based access, goal-based workflows. In terms of agent access, a goal-based approach also needs a lot more access for the agent because it's much more free form. You don't know exactly upfront what the agent will need to do in order to accomplish the goal. On the other axis, we have the trigger type. Again, if you just prompt the agent, that's like a chatbot, a co-pilot that you work together with, you bounce off ideas, you can kind of see all of the actions and approve all of the actions one by one. The next step is when you start working with headless agents. Maybe you give a prompt, but then you just kind of let it go loose, and you don't necessarily check each and every action that the agent is taking. What headless also truly means is that even the trigger itself is automated. So, maybe there is some event happening and you have defined that as a trigger. Okay, there is a new ticket in the system. Let this agent handle it. Let the CX agent respond instead of a human. So the appearance of the ticket is the trigger. It's automated. And then on the top right, we have the agent-to-agent communication, where the trigger to the agent is not some well-defined programmatic trigger, but it's just another agent prompting it. So you could imagine that there are various domain expert agents with various levels of access. And then if one agent needs to accomplish work in some other system or subdomain, that it will talk to that area's specific expert. And again, from the access model perspective, these are all very interesting to us. Again, as you move to headless and to agent, the scope and the autonomy of the agents increases, and it's harder to know what exactly the agent will do and what kind of access it's going to request. And the risk also increases, because this is the case of Neha's examples, where the agent had all this access in order to work on something big autonomously, and it made a mistake, maybe the context drifted, maybe it was a victim of prompt injection, and in the end it did something abusive with its access.
Yeah, and I think in just terms of popularity, to Greg, to your point, just adding one quick anecdote here, we are, agent to like basically looking at autonomous agents is not a thing of the future. It's arrived. Like it's interesting to have just seen sort of the progress even in the last 6 months, where the conversations were a lot around co-pilot agents, and now we're already talking to folks that are, dealing with headless agents and fully autonomous agents, which means now more than ever, it's really important to sort of evaluate how you're thinking about access that these agents have, and thinking truly about how some of these agents are triggered, and ensuring that you can add security controls that are tailored to those workflows, processes that you anticipate these agents sort of touching upon in the future.
Exactly. And most of this is probably already happening in organizations without them knowing it. Like, just in the engineering org, I know that, code reviews and responses people can just automate these themselves. It can be an automatic trigger just on the laptop, right? And you might not know about it.
Yep, 100%.
How to define an agentic identity? So as we dug into this problem of, access for agents and how autonomy is really a strong indicator for the risk, we found another problem set that is actually very important to clarify before we go on. What is even an agent? It seems like, we are throwing this around that the agent does this, the agent does that, but it's not 100% crisp what exactly the agent's identity is if you dig into the technical level. So we use these terms originator and agent equals the blended identity context. So originator is, for example, a workload identity. Maybe it's a user if you're talking about interactive agents, or maybe another agent if you're talking about agent-to-agent communication. But it's that first thing that kicks off the workflow. The first identity, because it could be an automation, right? That's not necessarily an identity, but the first either human or agent identity that is the beginning of this workflow. Then we have an agent. It could be running on the laptop. It could be hosted in the cloud. And that is the intermediate identity that actually logs into different systems and accomplishes the tasks. And what's important, the realization we made is that both of them are very important in order to make authorization decisions. And why that is so, because the two frequent models that we've seen people adopt is that, hey, access equals the originator or access equals the agent. And both of them have problems. If access equals the originator, it might be, a human, and humans are typically very much trusted, and they will have, admin access to different things with the assumption that they will not make mistakes or not take irresponsible actions. But organizations typically don't want the humans' access to carry over an agentic workflow. On the other end, if you just use the agent's identity, it means that there's an agent, again, probably very, very broad permissions that multiple originators can interact with. And so in the system that the agent is interacting with, you lose the context of who the originator is, and you cannot tailor the access to the originator anymore. And an example here that we have is about an automated PR process where there's a Jira ticket that's filed for the engineering team, and there is an agent that detects it and picks it up autonomously and goes and reads the GitHub repos that it thinks are relevant to address the issue in this ticket. Now, which repos can the agent read? Like if Sarah filed the ticket, who is an engineer, can the agent read all the repos that Sarah can? Or, can it only read the repos that this agent is assigned to upfront by the creator of the agent? And we believe that the right answer is actually neither. The right answer is this is the PR drafter agent, and based on the context that based on the context of who filed the ticket, we need to scope the agent's access down to the task.
Yeah, and I think this is really, really relevant, even as we were talking about some of, the newspaper articles that we've seen recently where some of this permission was abused, is exactly this scenario where, again, agent had an identity, and without sort of understanding what the trigger was for the agent, again, utilize those broad permissions to do whatever it had to do. And that, the worst case scenario was kind of deleting all of the database and database copies, which is, any organization's nightmare, like losing all of your production data in a matter of seconds. But I think you bring up a good point is like, that blended identity thing that we've been talking about here at nauseum at P0 Security is really important. And you want to ensure the context of that identity on both the originator and the agent is sort of carried across the tool chain. So it's not only evaluation the MCP gateway layer, for example, because that still may be like, broadly defined, but at the end of the day, where the data exists, that underlying resource, whether that is your Snowflake database, whether that's your Salesforce CRM system or your GitHub system, at the end of the day, you should be, that concept of that identity, that combined identity of the originator and the agent, that blended identity should be used to sort of evaluate those policies at a most granular level. And again, from an access perspective, I think we fundamentally always believe like, the best place to be in is having zero standing privileges, and more so for the agentic use case. So again, for any of these agent requests coming in, you're evaluating that blended identity and ensuring access or ephemeral entitlements are sort of granted for that blended identity just as when they need it and for the specific action they're approved to take. So kind of being, you know, policy based. So any security team, one has a full perspective of what identity is able to sort of evaluate these policies in real time, ensuring little to no friction and ensuring that these can be enforced all the way down to the data that you're trying to access. And at the end of the day, if somebody comes knocking at your door asking questions on like, hey, what access did your agentic identity have or your agent have and who invoked it, you basically have that entire sort of tool chain available in an audit history, so you could present that and essentially like give complete perspective of that to your either compliance teams or whoever is asking for that information. And again, to your earlier point, like, security teams can sleep easy understanding with the knowledge that they not only have perspective on these agentic identities, but how these are actually accessing underlying resources within an organization.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, that here the decision, that kind of the statement you want to be able to make in terms of enforcement, right? Before Agentic, you could make statements like this NHI can do XYZ action on this resource. Like this was the tuple of the subject, object, and the action. But now the subject actually need to be broken down. You want to be able to make the statement that this originator via this agent is able to do
Yep.
XYZ on this resource. And that's
Yeah.
that's what we have been building at P0.
Yeah, and that helps you fine tune policies too, right? So if I am able to access, if I can access HR data, I should be only be able to access HR data for me, myself, and my team, and not for the entire organization. You kind of want to, but you're not building 100 HR agents for every employee within your organization. You're using one agent and giving, access to more than one user essentially or identity to access that, and being able to finally define those policies and ensure the enforcement happens at every single layer is really crucial to succeed. And I think any shortcuts around that is not going to yield into any positive results, because you are inadvertently going to give more access than needed to these agentic identities, which even in the case of non-malicious / naive agents can be exploited. So that's something that you want to stay away from and think about as you're designing your agentic applications and how access is granted. You should, think across that tool chain and think about the agentic identity, the propagation, and ensuring that enforcement happens across every layer. Just talking a little bit about, like, from our perspective, I think, zero standing privileges is something that we've always talked about in the platform. With agentic applications, it's been a natural extension into these agentic runtime environments. It does mean that we had to develop a couple of new components to ensure that we were available in the most frictionless way possible in these agentic environments, and ensuring that we can sort of support the different use cases that we are seeing across the organization. But in the end, it's the authorization control plane where you define policies and we ensure that these policies are enforced. That enforcement point we were talking about for these different agentic identities across that tool chain, starting from either MCP or tool level access, all the way down to any sort of any data that you're trying to access, whether that's in your cloud environments, whether these are your SaaS applications. So we ensure that the concept of that blended identity and is enforced, or policies are enforced at that layer across every step of the way using the architecture we have in place. All right, how do we get started, Greg? Tell us.
Yeah, let's talk about, where organizations are now, and I think also refer back to the statement Kelsey made in the beginning, which is, P0 is about securing all identities, including users, machines, and agents. So let's look at maybe the whole landscape for a minute. Access is not a new problem because even your existing users and existing workloads probably have, more access than what they need. And very often, as I said, these existing identities are just passed on to agentic access. So one way to get started is to actually clean up user and machine access, where you can look at what are your current standing permissions and what are used out of these permissions, what are the risky ones, what are the non-risky ones, and you can sort of do a housekeeping around existing access. How does this housekeeping look, right? Things that some things cannot be necessarily removed because they are needed for the operation of the business. So step 2 here is anything that can be necessarily just outright removed can be made at least just in time. What does that mean? It means that instead of just a binary yes no decision, you can make a yes if decision. So yes, this access is allowed if certain criteria are met, and these criteria can come from external systems, like is the person on call, or is there a ticket assigned to it, this thing in the ticketing system, like certain automated signals, or also a manual approval, like did the manager of this employee approve this access. So you can kind of enrich your policy with yes if, and then if allowed, if certain conditions are met, then the access is going to be provisioned in the target system using the target system's RBAC or entitlement language just in time. And next, what you can do is, these 2 steps are about existing NHI and user access. You could start there, but we have a unique opportunity now because agentic is new, and yes, people are using either their own identity or a shared workload account or agentic access, but still there's a unique opportunity now to introduce a policy in your organization about how agentic access should be done. And if you do that, then agentic is kind of a clean slate where you are able to establish the best practices from day one, or from the relatively early days of it, and prevent the kind of sprawl that has often happened with user and machine access. So you can define a policy for agentic workflows, and you can use the blended identity to decide what access is given to an agent. And of course, you can also apply the same policy where you can say, okay, this is not an agentic identity, this is the user identity, and these are the just-in-time rules that apply to users, or these are the rules that apply to workloads. And in order to secure the whole chain, you can deploy these runtime access controls, and you can map out some of the common use cases or workflows that happen in your organization. Maybe there's a security operation center, or some DevOps teams that use agents. So you can work together with these teams. The early adopters of HR of agentic, maybe it's in HR, right? And then you can identify your first users to kind of move on to the model of agentic access using blended identity. And then finally, as you onboard more and more, you can establish a feedback loop of now monitoring and auditing and checking how the policy works. Where does the policy need adjustment? Did I maybe move too many things into just in time? Does that create friction, or is that friction for good because it's actually risky access? You will get a lot more visibility into things that just went under the radar before. And yes, finally, if you want to hear more about this topic, and specifically, we are going to do a deeper dive into why MCP gateways are not enough for agentic access control. We will have another webinar coming up in October. And in the meantime, thank you for attending this one, and we'll look at all the questions and the discussions that those generate.
Great. Excuse me. Yes, thank you, Neha. Thank you, Greg. And I'm going to try and squeeze in one question, if you'll both humor me here, that we got in the chat. If you're controlling the agent independently from, I think what they're saying is independently from the user permissions, if those are being done separately, aren't you having the burden now of having to manage two separate permission systems? And how do you keep those from drifting apart?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. The idea behind a single control plane for all of these identities is precisely that there is just one policy language. So you can imagine that the definition is something like, if user comes in, and that's a separate category, but it's the same kind of policy language. So if the user comes in, they can do these things in these systems. Now there's a separate statement in the policy which says, if user comes through agent A, then they can do these other things in the same system. But it's actually quite the opposite. It's going to be a central place of this policy definition.
Great. Thanks, Neha. Anything to add?
Yeah, I think Greg's absolutely right. Like here, it's not disparate systems. This is essentially like, one single pane of glass. And this is what I was trying to emphasize with our architecture as well, that, we already had support for human identities, non-human identities, and now with agentic identities and the idea that we're still sort of controlling authorization across every step of the way down to tool level access, or essentially resource level access. That's something that we already supported for other identities. So if anything, that actually this simplifies the model and allows you to go more granular. So it's single pane of glass with one policy, single policy definitions. You can define how how the behaviors would change if it was an agent, if it is a human, non-human identity, and agent with respect to the different identities that actually trigger it.
Great. Thank you both so much. And thank you everyone for attending. We should hold this webinar again in 6 months' time and see what sticks and what continues to shift. But please do mark your calendars for our next webinar session with Greg and Shashwat, where we'll go deeper into the different control models that are out there and the depth that's really required to fully secure these agent identities that we talked through today. So thank you, and we'll see you at the next one.